For 25 years, the Nebraska Jewish Historical Society has rescued pieces of the past and preserved very special treasures. Treasures that keep memories alive and tell the stories of a community. But who can tell the story of the Historical Society itself? Mary Fellman and Oliver Pollack, two of this community's extra special treasures.
When I was president of the Federation, I went to Miami, Florida as the president. I walked into a room and they had tables, card tables set up, and they had tape recorders on the card tables. And somebody said to me, "Sit down here and talk to us." So I said, "What do you want me to talk about?" They said, "Just tell us about your life. What is your name? Who are your parents? You know, all that." I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "We're doing oral histories." So I said, "Tell me about it, because I'm thinking about something for for Omaha." Well, they said there was a man in Pittsburgh who used to tell stories and everything, and they sat him down and they said to us, "Talk to us." And he said, "By myself, I'm a book." And that's what they named their project. By myself, I'm a book. So I went home with all of this in my head. And my friend Ethelyn Kolakowski had been saying to me, "You got to do something. You've got to start the Historical Society. You've got to remember everything that happened in the past." I knew that there was such a guy as Oliver Pollack. And I said, "I don't know how to do this by myself." So somebody said to me, "Call Oliver. He knows how to do this kind of stuff." He didn't know any more about it than I did. But the two of us sat down together, and for 2 years, from 1980 to 1982, we sat and talked.
Mary said to me, "Oliver, I have an idea for you." And I barely knew Mary at that time. I would see her on Shabbos at Bethel Synagogue, the old Bethel, and she always liked to invite people over for Shabbos dinner, and Karen and myself and our children were fortunate enough to be invited. And we built a bond, and we had a good time, but then we started to have this intellectual meeting of the minds. Her roots going so deep into Omaha, having been an editor of the Jewish press in the mid-40s. She remembers going to see Henry Monsky, and how I don't know whether her knees shook or whether she quivered, but she said it was an awesome experience to go see Henry Monsky. Henry Monsky, of course, died in 1947, but for me, knowing Mary, talking to her about this was my lifeline, my human linkage to people that were really important and weren't with us any longer, and may not have left much of a paper trail, but certainly left a project.
And I invited Lois Friedman and Joey Cohn and Sivy Rothman to sit with us. The five of us sat for 2 years and talked about how to do this, what to do, all of this kind of stuff. So here I am with Maury gone, my mother gone, and the one thing that is keeping me busy is the Historical Society. And so after a number of weeks of being able to go back and all this, I really sort of, I don't know if it adopted me or I adopted it. I used to go to the Jewish Community Center in the morning, and I would have a drawer that I would sit next to on the floor in front of what was Steve Rod's office. And that was where I started. And then one day, who was working with him? Somebody who was working with him came out and said, "You can't sit on the floor. That's no way. What are you doing?" So I said, "I haven't any place to sit." I had decided that I had to be at the Jewish Community Center. That was the place for us to be. And so he said to me, "You need a desk." I said, "I don't have a desk." He said, "I'll get you a desk." So he got me a desk, and he put it in the side there by Steve's office. Then he came by one day, or Steve came by and said, "You can't sit at your desk without a telephone." I I said, I don't have a telephone. And they got me a telephone. And then he said, you can't sit there with everybody going by and talking to you the way they do. Anyway, what happened was I got a section, they built it off, and then they gave us another section, you know, and that was how we grew. That was how we grew. And I think that because I knew everybody at the center, because I knew everybody in Federation, because I cared so much about what I was doing, everybody supported what I was doing. And so that was how we got started, and we set up a board, and we went from one little place into another little place at the Jewish Community Center. In the meantime, we were doing exhibits, we were putting out newsletters, we were doing all this. Oliver and I were doing it together and with all these other people who were really caring about what we were doing.
We didn't know in the early 1980s that there were so many scrapbooks, so many immigration documents. Mary was there like a Zommler, the rescuer of Omaha's Jewish history.
We never complained about space. I never said to them, I need more space, because I thought I was lucky to have what I had. We got the corridor of Jewish history because one day Temple Israel called up and they said, we have 6 display cases that we're not going to use because we have new ones. Would you like to look at them? And I said, of course. And I dashed over there, and all 6 of them were acceptable, because what did I know if they were good or not? They were free, and they were there. And I said, fine. So I came back, and I went into Steve Rod, and I said, Steve, guess what? I've got 6 cases, display cases. Got to figure out a place to put them. He said, there's no place in the building. I said, oh, come on, Steve, let's go see. So we walk out of his office, we go past the door, and at that point, we had just finished building the Livingston Plaza. So now we had an entryway between the community center and the Livingston Plaza. So we're standing there, and Steve looks at this little area there that we've got, and he says to me, you know what? You could have a little museum in here. So I said to him, okay. I dashed out, and I called Oliver. I said, Oliver, do you know what Steve just said to me? That we could have a little museum in here? He said, oh, a corridor of Jewish history? And that's what we named it. And that's how we got that. And then we decided to do an exhibit on the history of the Jewish organizations. And at that point, Alan Potash was at the center. And he said, I'll work with you. And he and I put that exhibit together. Now, we knew nothing about exhibits, but we did it. Now, it hung in the gallery of the JCC, and then there was an empty wall. So I said to one of the fellows, do you suppose we could use that wall for a while? And they said, of course. So we put it up on that wall. Well, then, gradually, we got more exhibits, and we took over all the wall space. And then we had this exhibit on the organizations, and I said, do you suppose that we could use the auditorium for this exhibit? And they said, well, I don't know why not. And nobody has said no to us. That's the interesting thing. Nobody has said no. And I think the reason for it is not because of me, but I think it's because it added beauty to the building. It added history to the building. It gave people something to look at.
And now there are thousands upon thousands of photographs, thousands and thousands upon documents. And you can go to the archives and see shelves upon shelves of material. You can open those boxes and find this treasure. And that's been the biggest thrill, to be there at the beginning, whenever anybody wanted information about Jewish history. But I would say, go talk to Mary Fellman. She'll tell you what she knows and what she remembers, and who else might still be around that dated that person, that did business with that person. So she was a real mental trove of information.
You've got to remember everything that happened in the past. You've got to remember everything that happened in the past. You've got to remember everything that happened in the past.